So what's the truth about liver health?
So your liver is actually storing your anger and frustration, and this is what you can do to release it today. Parasites are these microorganisms that we can contract through foods, through even barefoot walking. There's all these ridiculous ways of getting parasites.
So it's really small. Did you help people make more money?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give me examples?
Taking-
Tuna is not healthy, is that what you're saying?
No, it's not. It's the worst fish you can consume.
That's news for me. All right, let's start. Ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I used to be a photographer and I used to follow all the models from the Netherlands. And then I found your Instagram model from the Netherlands who is just moving, I think, to California. Mm-hmm. But you were the only model who was actually showing like the real side. Like all the models that I followed, they were like, look how beautiful I am. But you were like, I had bloating issues, I had those issues, I had all those problems. The modeling industry is harsh, right? Mm. There's a lot of problems. Photographers mistreated me, stuff like that. And you were really authentic. And that was so refreshing because that was like 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, when people were not authentic on Instagram at the beginning. So you were one of the first ones to do that. And I think this is why your Instagram grew a lot and you started to become more than just a model, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was in the modeling industry for over 10 years. And
when did you start? Because you're quite young.
Yeah, I started when I was 15 years old. And so right out of high school, I started like full-time modeling. So I traveled all over, like Milan, Southeast Asia, and then eventually I went to New York, which is like the big thing. When I was there, it was like, okay, like I really want to make everything happen to move to the United States. Like it was like this dream that, you know what, it actually, like I never wanted to go to the United States or to New York until I was there. And it was like suddenly, it's kind of like what you see in the movies, you know, it's like, it's super magical. There's so much energy in the city. And I was like, wow, it's so refreshing to come from a country where people don't really care about like their health and like really like optimizing their well-being to, you know, mind you, I come from like a small town and this was like 7-8 years ago in Holland.
Okay.
And I was in New York and kind of in the wellness industry. And I was like, wow, there's all these like high achievers and they're working for themselves and they're working out like all the time. And so I like really fell in love with the idea of that, obviously. Not with New York because it's not as much of a health.
I can imagine, Donald.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah.
you found your own places. Like where exactly did you find those places?
I just, you know, it's like when you find a lot of models that are also interested in the same things. And for me, it was a lot of yoga and spirituality and meditation. And so I started finding all these like really small, cute places that I really fell in love with. And this is really when for the first time I picked up a Joe Dispenza book. And it was really my first intro to spirituality on this level, right? My parents were spiritual-ish growing up, but still it wasn't to this level where I could figure out, you know, how to rewire my mind. And then COVID happened and I went home and suddenly my whole life started collapsing and I was like, okay, my whole job just disappeared, right? Like COVID happens, the pandemic happens and there's no modeling anymore.
I would imagine the opposite though. Everyone's buying online.
Yeah, but this was early COVID, so like no one could do anything, right? And I was like, okay, what am I truly contributing to the world right now? And it was promoting fast fashion, it was promoting eating disorders, right? And so I just had this complete meltdown and being like, oh my gosh, I'm completely broke, like had no money whatsoever. Thank God I was able to live on the government a little bit. Parents didn't have any money. I felt like I wasn't contributing to the world. And I was like, is this truly it for me? And I was so depressed at the time. Like, you know, I was in a long distance relationship that like ended up not being a great thing for me either. And thankfully, because of him, I ended up moving to LA. So I moved to LA. And once I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much here for me. And the whole wellness industry was so big. And during COVID is really when I found my love for plant medicine, for meditation, for just spirituality and self-improvement. And I started meditating 2 hours a day. And mind you, I know.
That's a lot.
It's a lot because I had never meditated before, really. You know, it's like, yeah, maybe in like a yoga class at the end or something, but I'd never really meditated.
So
and
you are hardcore.
Which actually we'll get to probably, but also ended up almost killing me sometimes. But for me, it's kind of like go hard or go home. And I took a Joe Dispenza intensive course. I studied the whole method and I was like, okay, I feel like this. I don't like my life and I really want to make something out of it. And so I started meditating, like an hour in the morning, an hour at night. And for the first time ever, I started looking into myself and just coming into contact with these younger parts of me, where I was just sitting in meditation and suddenly there was a memory that would come up from when I was at school and I was being bullied. And this is the first time after 6 years that I was able to feel my emotions, because I had completely repressed all of my emotions. I was like the one girl that never cried, and I was so emotionally strong. And after 6 years through meditation, I was able to access these younger parts of myself that were actually super sad and really afraid. And once I was able to sit with these parts and just let them speak and see what they wanted, it was just like all these tears coming out. And it was interesting because for the first time I learned that the emotion wasn't actually taking over me, but I was witnessing the emotion. So because I was in meditation and I was just observing tears coming out of my eyes without the emotion fully taking over my body. And so I would do that day in and day out and essentially start to see all these black spots in my mind's eyes all over my back. And I had like chronic back pain for so long, like years of that. And every single day I would essentially start to visualize where that black spot was and just kind of like imagine myself digging at it. And every day there was a new memory and I had to feel through a new emotion. And so after a few months, I had completely shifted my health just through meditation and through what we now call energy work, which I really wasn't aware of that I was actually doing. So that led me to just be so excited about meditation, where I was like, wait, I was astral projecting myself and doing healing on myself outside of my body. And this is just something that really came natural to me. So when I was talking to my friends about meditation, I was like, yeah, like, don't you like step out of your body and then heal yourself and all these things? And so then from there, like knowing that that interest was there, once I was in LA, and at the time I was actually in a new relationship and started like meditating more, things like that. I was still experiencing a lot of gut issues, a lot of anxiety and things like that from time to time, which I had had for...
What do you mean by gut issues?
So I grew up with gut issues, basically like bloating, constipation, for as long as I can remember. Like this is something that I struggled with as a kid, and my mom's doctor, who was actually like more of a holistic doctor, actually would tell her, your daughter has gut issues because your dad doesn't process his emotions. So I would just absorb everyone's emotions, and when my dad was feeling sad, I would get a stomach ache. This is, you know, like highly sensitive people, for them this is both their gift and their curse. Like they take on other people's emotions because they have a completely permeable nervous system and everything just comes in. So for years, because of, you know, my gut, or my teenage years, being bullied, being really sad, repressing all my anger, over time my body just developed all these gut issues that got even more severe. And another piece that's really important to mention here is that specifically because I was in the modeling industry, I was carrying so much self-hatred and shame, which are all emotions that we store in our gut and in our liver.
What do you mean by that? Like, what shame is there in the modeling industry?
Yeah, so in the modeling industry, as models, right, we have a lot of self-hatred. We have a lot of shaming our bodies. And this is not everyone, but this is specifically women. And it's...
I think the opposite. I would think the opposite. Like people would
really
think the opposite. Of course, you're a model. You're like, you have this ego of like, I'm the queen, right?
Yeah, and that's the facade, right? So the part of the model, that's the ego, that's like, I'm the best, I'm so good looking. That's essentially the facade to what's really underneath that. So in my specific journey, this looked like I was bullied for being the ugliest person in school my entire life. I know.
No way.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone was calling me witch, and I was like the one kid that was always bullied. This was till I was like 12 years old, 13 years old.
And then you became pretty?
Not yet. I feel like I started wearing a lot of makeup then, but I really started to like become pretty, like...
I mean, from society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like a little bit older, I'd say like 15, which is also when I started modeling and I started like, you know, letting my eyebrows grow a little bit normal again.
How did you go from like being the ugliest girl to the prettiest girl in class?
So I wouldn't really say that either or are different. Like it was just the same person. It's just that, you know, I was just an easy kid to pick on, which is probably based on like how I was triggering people. It wasn't really about how I looked. So it was just about the people that were perceiving me a certain way, where like I was the kid in school, my parents were really poor, and I was in a really rich school. So instantly I'm the ugly one, right? Because my parents can't afford the designer clothes. But then when I model and I'm getting all this praise, instantly I'm the pretty one. The person's the same, she looks the same, but it's just the perception that has changed. So
Kids are mean.
and kids are mean, right? So what happened is that I started really overcompensating for my self-hatred and for like the shame that I had for my body, because I truly thought that I was, fat and ugly, which is what they call me. So immediately that landed me in an eating disorder. And I really started to pay attention to what I was eating. And because I felt so out of control in the world, the only thing that I would control was what was going into my body and how much I could work out. So I started seeing my body as this like calculation. Calories in, calories out, how much can I work out? And it was this constant calculations in my head. First of all, that level of control that you're trying to have, like all these control issues, and then as well as like the shame and the sadness that was super suppressed, as well as so much anger and rage towards everyone that was bullying me, and also to, my parents for potentially not being a safe space and things like that. All of that was repressed.
Can you give examples for what happens?
I grew up in a household and my dad was an alcoholic. So I never really had a safe space to really express my emotions. And this is...
What examples do you have from that, or memories, trauma?
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, it wasn't bad because it was normal, right?
Of course.
So the only thing I know is that the relationship was really confusing, because there were times where it felt like my dad, and then there were times where it felt like it wasn't my dad because, he was using substances. And so my parents at the time were functioning alcoholics. So, I loved them so much. They actually showed up amazing for, being alcoholics and things like that. And they've done everything they possibly could to like really give my sister and I an amazing life. But what happened is just the unavailability. And so what you learn as a child when there's alcoholism in the family is that it's not safe to a degree, right? It's like suddenly there's an emotional availability and then suddenly there's not. So I just didn't really have a space for me to express my emotions. And so I started to internalize everything and to just shove it down. And because school and friends also didn't feel like a safe space, I just kept it all inside. And then once I turned 14, 15, I became suicidal. I was super depressed, and I basically just didn't want to leave my bed because that was the only safe space for me. And during that time, it was so uncomfortable to deal with all those emotions that, you just suppress.
What caused you to be suicidal? And thanks for sharing, by the way. Thanks for being up.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a combination of a lot of things. I think from a physical perspective, we can look at heavy metals, we can look at liver congestion, we can look at gut issues, like all these things play into depression, anxiety, and things like that. So if your liver is congested, your body can't properly detox. If you're full of toxins, that's going to have such a huge impact on your brain, on your levels of serotonin. And it's the same with the gut, because if the liver is congested, it's not creating enough bile flow, which I know I had a super congested liver because my parents had amalgam fillings. So there's a ton of mercury that I actually inherited. So I didn't even have a fair chance coming into this world because of all the toxic metals that were in my system. Toxic metals are really at the root of just a lot of digestive issues and a lot of mental disorders as well. So what I was seeing in myself and perceiving is that my gut wasn't healthy. So I was producing way lower levels of serotonin, which is really the hormone that makes you happy. So people that have depression and anxiety, like it's so related to their gut, it's related to the liver. So that was happening from a physical standpoint. And on top of that, being bullied for 10 plus years, not having a safe space to come home to, it's kind of like, what's the point of being alive, right? And that all...
You didn't get so much love.
I got love in the ways that it was available, but...
What do you mean by that?
Like, I know my parents loved me a lot, and at the same time, the love that I needed wasn't there. So like, I wanted a safe space to come home to where my parents were both present, right? Instead, I came home to like maybe them being stressed and already drinking, so they're emotionally not available for me to really receive that nurturing and love. And so in that moment as a child, you shut down and you suppress. You're kind of like, oh wow, like I just went to school and I had all these emotions and I was being bullied, and you come home and it's kind of this moment of like, oh, like I can't let it go here as well. And so then basically what happened for me to get suicidal was just a combination of the emotions, the mental patterns, the physical body, and it all just kind of combined. And the way I even look at that is that, you know, even the physical symptoms and the emotions, there has to be resonance at some point, right? So for there to be heavy metals in your system, think about the resonance of the heavy metal. Like there has to be a lot of like repressed emotion and anger and things like that. And so the way I like to look at things is if someone has something in their psyche, right? Let's say it's depression or they have a lot of low self-esteem, they are more likely to choose habits such as smoking in my case that contain heavy metals because there's a resonance between the heavy metal and the emotion that your body is carrying. So my toxicity was only building up, and you know, I was depressed, I had a ton of brain fog, I couldn't function properly, my belly looked like I was 9 months pregnant all the time. And
You're exaggerating, stop it.
no, like
9
it was
months is a
crazy.
lot.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, well, you do have photos too, but
I have, okay. Let's say 3 months pregnant.
3 months, yeah.
3 months pregnant. It felt like it was 9 months pregnant. Like it felt like it was actually bursting. And, you know, my eyes were always red, and I had extreme sensitivities to like perfumes and to makeup products. Like I would always get breakouts, crazy food sensitivities. I couldn't eat anything.
What's that?
Like pimples and things like that, acne. Yeah.
So from like perfume?
From perfume or from specific makeup. And so when you're having a lot of sensitivities to that, it's another sign that your liver is overburdened, because it already, like if you imagine a bucket, if it's already full, you know, it's one drop and the bucket overflows. And so this is kind of a great example when there's food sensitivities or perfume sensitivities. It typically just means that there's a deeper level of toxicity that's already excreting your body's ability to properly detox. And so, yeah, in my case, you know, I was experiencing all those symptoms, and from there being so unhappy and always being bloated and things like that, like I was forced to go on this holistic health journey. And for me, that started with going to the regular Western medicine doctor and asking about my symptoms and being like, I'm always bloated and I can't.
Parasite-emotion.
Exactly, yeah. No, they actually told me, they were like, you know what? I think you need to change your diet. I think, first of all, this is something called IBS, they labeled it, and it's something that you just have to learn to live with. But what we can do is we can give you a dietitian that's just going to tell you to eat differently. And if you know anything about dietitians in Holland 10 years ago, like I actually was studying to become a dietitian, and the moment that I started my bachelor's, I was like, I'm good. You know, it's like you're telling people to eat more dairy and more bread and things like that, which is actually the things that were triggering me. And so I was basically left with an IBS diagnosis, and go figure it out. We don't know anymore. So
Interesting. Yeah. Why is that?
IBS is an umbrella term for everything that they can't figure out. So they just call it IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And you have IBS-D, which is IBS with diarrhea, IBS-C with constipation, or you have IBS that has mostly bloating and things like that. And for me, it was a combination of constipating and bloating, extreme bloating. And they just give you the term, and then they're like, okay, well, we don't have a cure for this. So
what is bloating? Like, I know what it is, but how does it look like from inside out?
So there's different types of bloating. So you have bloating that's caused by gas, which is usually because of fermentation in the gut. And so those gases are byproducts of the fermentation product, they're byproducts of the fermentation process, which is causing the gut to bloat, right? So there's excess gas. Then you have bloating, which is really just inflammation. So that can also cause a lot of bloating because inflammation, right? There's a lot of water that's being pumped to the tissues that are inflamed to kind of cool down the inflammation. Then you have bloating caused by excess fructose. So if you're eating a lot of fruit, this is what a lot of people will see. If you're sensitive to this kind of bloating, let's say you drink a cup of coconut water, you can bloat almost immediately. So this is just because of the fruit sugars, and it's not actual bloating that lasts. So if you eat like a big smoothie bowl or a big, bottle of coconut water, it can cause a lot of bloating. So you have all these different types of bloating, and then you can also have bloating just because you have constipation, so excess waste. And then when the toxins start to recycle in your gut, think about that. It can cause more inflammation and more gas and things like that. So yeah, there's multiple times of bloating.
And which one did you have?
So it was hard because no one can give me answers, right? So I was experiencing a lot of gas, but I also know that there was a lot of inflammation because of all the excess toxins in my system. So it was kind of a combination of all of them. There were food sensitivities that I was having. My gut was extremely leaky, meaning that when I would eat certain foods, I would immediately get like breakouts, or I would breakouts, like skin.
Pimple. Okay.
Yeah, I would get pimples immediately after eating something, or I would get extremely fatigued. And so that happens when the gut is leaky, because little food particles will get into your bloodstream and your body will start attacking them. So food sensitivities are not a real chronic issue. Food sensitivities just mean that your gut is more permeable than it should be, and also that your liver isn't properly excreting enough bile. So that's really what I like to look at with clients. If there's a lot of food sensitivities, typically when I take them through a detox, it all clears up. So at the time I couldn't eat anything, and I was like limiting myself to that. I was doing every cleanse under the sun. I was, doing a ton of research, talking to functional medicine doctors. They would tell me about SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So I started looking into that. I was on supplements all the time. Like I was probably on like 10 supplements a day for like 3 years at least.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's like a grandma.
I know, exactly. And I was kind of managing my symptoms. So I was restricting my diet to like this much. Like I was basically eating plain chicken and rice and fish. Unfortunately, a lot of tuna, which I then found out contributed to my heavy metals even more. And I was thinking,
tuna is not healthy. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not. It's the worst fish you can consume.
That's news for me. Can you educate me?
Yeah. So tuna, because it's such a big fish, it's also one of the only fishes that consume a ton of food. Meaning that if there's just a little bit of mercury all in the system, right? Like it's just our waters are completely polluted. So all the tiny little fish are going to have low levels of mercury. But because tuna actually uses so much energy, it has to eat a lot of fish. So what happens is it accumulates incredibly high levels of mercury in its flesh. And tuna is by far the fish with the highest level of mercury. So this is also why they say tuna is unsafe for pregnant women to eat. And especially, obviously, if you're going to eat it raw. Now we're also talking about parasites. And now we haven't even talked about the microplastics yet. So tuna is one thing that I'll never eat in my life again.
Okay. Thanks. I'm learning a lot, by the way. Yeah. And I'll make sure to do the same thing. Okay, I just ate salmon. Is that fine?
Was it raw or?
No, it wasn't raw.
Okay. So with salmon as well,
a lot of people actually say that raw is really good. I mean, there's raw diets, right?
We're talking about raw meat. It's a little bit different. So raw is better because raw food still contains the enzymes to digest itself. So it's a lot easier on the body, and specifically when we have low enzyme levels or we're wanting to cleanse, what we do is we consume raw foods because, for example, if you eat a raw apple, the apple already has the enzymes to digest itself. It's the same with meat, right? So beef, if you eat it raw, has the enzymes to digest itself. Same with raw milk. It has the enzymes to digest itself. So what we do is we heat and kill the foods, meaning that our bodies have to work harder to digest our bodies have to work harder to create the enzymes to actually properly digest it. So whenever we're cleansing or we want to put less strain in our body, eating raw is really good for us. But when we're talking about fish, and I'm talking about fish that is not sustainably farmed, because I use the company called Seatopia, and they're the only fish that I would actually consume raw because it's all sustainably farmed. There's no parasites, there's no microplastics, no mercury that gets into the system. When you're eating raw fish at a sushi restaurant, the likelihood of you getting parasites, I mean, we all have them, but it's really, really high. So definitely would not recommend eating sushi.
I've seen your Instagram, seen your photos. I've seen like big parasites. What is a parasite, first of all? And how do I look at it? Because sushi is quite small, and I don't see things moving there, right?
Some people actually do see things moving in there if you pick around in it long enough. But yeah, so I mean, parasites are microorganisms, right? Like they've been around for far longer than we have. So what I don't fully agree with is the whole craze about killing parasites. What you're doing when you're killing parasites is you're actually starting an internal war. So but yeah, parasites are these microorganisms that, we can contract through foods, through even barefoot walking. Like there's all these ridiculous ways of getting parasites.
So it's really small.
It's really small. It can actually enter your skin.
So we can't see it, some of them.
Some of them, no. Some of them are microscopic parasites, and some of them are actual worms. So you may see like a little white worm, which like in your body can turn into like a really big worm over time. But yeah, the most common ones that I see in my practice are the worms, so like a hookworm, a roundworm, or I see a lot of liver flukes because I do a lot of liver cleanses with my clients. So I also had hundreds of liver flukes in my liver.
I don't know what it is.
So a liver fluke it almost looks like a little snail, and they bury themselves into the bile ducts of your liver. So your liver has like hundreds of little bile ducts because the liver creates your bile and then it brings it up to the gallbladder. So what these liver flukes do, because they feed on your bile, they will bury themselves into the little bile ducts of your liver and actually blocking up the tubes. So what it does is it actually causes more liver stagnation and more liver toxicity because now the bile, which is your detoxification fluid, that's how your liver releases toxins, it's not able to leave the body. So I personally flushed out over 500 of these liver flukes. So this is contributing a lot to...
How do you do that? Like
liver flushes? No.
Liver flushes?
Liver flushes, yeah. So we'll get there in a moment, but yes.
I'm a newbie, by the way.
Yes.
I'm like...
Okay. So the thing with parasites is that everyone wants to kill them nowadays, right?
Okay.
They're the bad thing. The way I look at it is I look at it through terrain theory. So terrain theory essentially means that when there's resonance, something can live there, right? So for example, how come two people can be in the same environment and one person gets sick and the other doesn't? The only difference is their internal terrain. We can call it the immune system, but we can also call it like the immune system of like the emotional body, the mental body, etc. So if your system is more permeable and it's full of toxins, it's full of waste and full of negative or repressed emotion, there's going to be so much less energy in your body and less energy for your body to fight off parasites, to fight off viruses, that this virus, parasite, or mold thinks, oh, this is a great environment, I can live here. So everyone focuses on killing the mold, killing the parasite, or killing the virus.
What do you mean mold? Mold is something for the walls.
Yeah, well, it also gets into our system. Mold toxicity is one of the biggest reasons. A lot of, especially in America, it's really big. Mold can multiply really quickly. So when it gets into our brain or when it gets into our lungs or into our bodies, it can cause a lot of issues in the system.
Is that what you call tumor or things like that?
Not necessarily. I mean, mold could eventually cause things like that, right? But again, we have to look at what allowed the mold to even live in your body. So I like to give this example, right? When an animal dies, within a few hours, there's parasites on it, there's mold on it, right? There's all these little bugs like eating the animal.
Okay.
The bugs didn't find the animal, they were already inside. So bacteria, viruses, parasites, they're opportunistic, meaning that they have to be given the opportunity to multiply. If your body is strong enough, if your body is fully healthy, it's able to fight the mold, the parasites, the virus itself.
So there's a constant fight in our bodies.
It's not a fight. It's more like a protection, right? It's like we get exposed to things all the time, but our bodies are really intelligent and it can detox things. But if you have a ton of repressed emotion, or if you're eating McDonald's all the time, or a lot of seed oils, and you have a lot of inflammation in your system, or if your nervous system is in constant fight or flight, your body is not going to, it's not going to like protect itself against this mold or this parasite that just came in because it's trying to survive elsewhere. So if all your energy is being drawn to either trying to stay out of fight or flight, or to get rid of the inflammation because your diet looks like absolute shit, then you have more likelihood to get, viruses, parasites, molds, etc. So the way I like to look at things is that the parasites will leave the body naturally once we start to change the environment. So I completely changed my techniques with how I work with parasites, and it's been more effective than ever. So I used to actually, do a lot of killing protocols, which is what you see online now. Everyone's taking like a parasite protocol, doing a full moon parasite cleanse, and they can be effective temporarily, but if you don't address the root cause, you're actually making the problem worse. Because the parasites, like I mentioned, right, they feed on your bile. So they feed your bile, including your toxins. They eat on your metals. So there's a reason that they're in your body, like it's a perfect ecosystem. So if you're now just going to kill the parasites, it's like ripping off the Band-Aid. The parasites were also there.
It's like killing all the lions.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
from an island, and
Yeah.
then you get too much chicken.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So this is why you have to first address the root, which is the terrain. Then most of the parasites will actually leave on their own. And then you can address some of the parasites. Let's say that you've had this really intense infection. You can address them with the right herbs and the right medications. So what I've done to change people's environment is really focus on nervous system regulation, detoxification, but this is actually one that's been most effective, which is energy work. And when I have a client session, if they're really susceptible to this kind of work and they have a lot of parasites, we do an energy work session. And after the session, they start releasing a bunch of parasites. And I've seen this over and over again.
Means. What is energy session?
Yeah. So what we do is that every single element in the body has an energetic counterpart. That's how I look at it. So parasites, for example, they're not just physical parasites, but there's also an energetic correlation to that, right? So if, for example, you are in an environment where there's a lot of parasitic energy, meaning that like you're with people that are constantly sucking your energy, maybe at work or something like that, that's probably going to be reflected in your body with having a lot of parasites. So when we do the internal work, when we do emotional release work, subconscious reprogramming, helping you set boundaries and really letting go of these like energetic attachments that you have, whether it's, entities or whether that's actually just you being unable to set boundaries. So you're absorbing your colleagues', really unhealthy energy. The moment that you create that boundary, again, this is also reflected in your body because now you've just changed your inner environment as well. So then these parasites can actually leave the body because they no longer are able to be there. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'm in a toxic relationship. What problems can this cause internally?
When you're in a toxic relationship, we have to define the term toxic as well, right? Because there's so many different relationships dynamics that can be toxic for someone. Like there can actually be a really good relationship dynamic, but someone's nervous system can receive that as toxicity.
Right.
So first of all, typically what happens is the nervous system gets affected. So a lot of times we see like push-pull dynamics, for example. So if you're constantly in fight or flight because you're afraid that your partner is going to respond this way and then maybe tomorrow he's going to respond that way, what's happening is that your entire system is being affected right now. Because your nervous system is what regulates every single process in your body, specifically your digestive system. So when you're in a toxic relationship for a long time, issues that we can see over time is, for example, it starts with stomach acid that isn't low enough. Or it starts with reduced stomach acid. So your body isn't actually able to produce enough stomach acid, meaning that your food isn't digested properly because, it's constantly in fight or flight, it's not focused on digesting. What we see from there is that these undigested food particles now get into the intestines, causing things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we're talking about SIBO. Also in a toxic relationship, quite often there's a lot of boundary violation or inability to set boundaries, right? Which directly is connected to our liver, because our liver is where we hold anger and resentment. And having a healthy boundary, being able to say no, actually is that healthy expression of that anger. And so when you're not able to set that boundary, you're suppressing your no. So you're suppressing your anger, you're suppressing your resentment over and over again, bringing the energy down into the liver. And now you've created a perfect environment for parasites, for viruses, for mold. So, this is why a lot of people sometimes, when they're in toxic relationships, suddenly they'll get mold toxicity, or they're dealing with the parasite, or they're dealing with a viral infection.
Oh, interesting.
Super interesting, yeah. And over time, what this accumulation can look like, impaired liver function, impaired gut function. Now the gut is permeable. Now all the toxins are leaving through the skin, and this is when we see acne, breakouts, rosacea, other skin conditions. So really often I like to look at people and I ask, what's your relationship like? What's your relationship to yourself, first of all, because that's where it starts. What's your romantic relationship, your connection to the world? And based on that, I can actually determine a lot of patterns and emotions.
I might become a client. Almost sold. Can you explain this inner world with islands? So the ecosystem of our body with an island's ecosystem and how it changes.
Absolutely. Imagine you have an island, and on this island, it's a perfect ecosystem. right? So if there's too many of this species, that will allow this species to grow because there's more feed. And
You
then
have lions and chickens.
yeah. So let's say that there's more chickens, the amount of lions will probably grow because there's more food, right? So the way that we can look at this with our internal environment is that the lion in this case is our immune system, right?
Okay.
So let's say that our immune system has gone down because we're in chronic fight or flight. So we're maybe in that toxic relationship, or maybe we are having a lot of pent up emotions towards ourselves, right? We're like talking negatively about ourselves all the time. What happens is that the immune system goes down. So our bodies are spending a lot of energy focusing on healing this nervous system issue that's going on right now, whether it's from the relationship, whether it's from the negative self-talk or all the other emotions that are stored in the body. So now the chickens have the opportunity to grow. And the chickens in your body could be opportunistic bacteria, it could be viruses, it could be parasites, it could be molds, you know, I can keep going. So the way that your emotions play a really big role in this is that if you are able to fully release your emotions and not suppress them, the amount of lions will stay on track.
Right, because every day there are intruders coming to the island, right, from outside, from food, and then they kill the lions, right? So then once the immune system is not strong enough, so a lot of intruders come in, and then the lions are dying, and then there's too much chickens, and the chickens eat all the food, the grass, the all those things, and then it creates this balance. So what was your example? What was the problem inside your body, and how did you fix it yourself?
Yeah. So the main problems I was struggling with were infertility. I lost my cycle for 4.5 years.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy. I've never
crazy.
heard that before.
Yeah, so infertility, a lot of digestive issues, bloating, food sensitivities.
At what age?
I lost it at age 17 or 18. 18, I think. Age 22.
Okay, can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of women I know, they complain about their periods and stuff like that. How was it for you? Were you like, I'm good, or like how did you experience that? Because it sounds like suffering as well.
Like not having it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible. You know, it's like sometimes it was like, okay, this is fine, but like if you don't get it for 4.5 years, like your cycle is your 5th vital sign as a woman. So if it's missing, it's hinting to a much deeper issue in the system. So if you're not having a regular period, that should be the first thing that we look at. And for me, it was missing for 4.5 years. And I tried everything to get it back. You know, I was like, I tried to gain weight and I tried to, you know, do all these different things and eat better for my hormonal health. But for me, the main thing that kept it coming back was every time I fell in love, it would come back.
Yeah.
And so for me, I never learned to feel safe in my body. So the moment that I was in a relationship with a guy where I felt safe, my cycle came back. And every time I was in a push-pull dynamic for 3.5 years. And every time that we would break up, my period disappeared. And every time we would be back together, my period would come back. And so this is really something that I see so much with women is they never learned to feel safe in their body. And why the masculine is so good in creating safety is because maybe for the first time, if it's a safe man, your body is able to feel what true safety feels like. And your nervous system goes, and your body goes, and then there's the bleed. So
I'm a man, so I just don't understand it. What do you mean by not feeling safe in your body?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways, right? It's like women don't feel safe in their body because of so many ways, right? It's like maybe they didn't have the safe masculine presence when they were growing up. So maybe their dad wasn't emotionally available or wasn't actually physically present. So they never learned to relax in their body, relax in the nervous system. Because as a woman, you know, if you're mirrored healthy masculinity, like the masculine is really there to just be the safety, to be like the container, the holder of the feminine. And so when the feminine knows that she's safe, she's like the creative, like she's flowy, she's just like her body is working properly. So if there's a lack of safety in the body, whether it's from trauma, whether it's from sexual abuse, or just from childhood things, or sometimes it's even just self-induced. It can also be, in my case, you know, it's like if it's anxiety or PTSD, like that can create a lack of safety in the body as well. And so when the body finally feels safe, the cycle can come back. And that is a huge missing element, I feel like, in
Okay, so unsafe, like when you say you don't feel safe in your body, is that like when someone is looking at you? Do you feel judged, or what does it actually mean?
It actually means that as children, sometimes the first thing that we learn is that it's safer to be out of your body than in your body, meaning that you mentally dissociate from actually being fully in your body energetically. So a good example of this is that let's say that there's household violence, or let's say that there is sexual abuse, right? What you perceive as a child is it's not safe to be here. So what you do is you mentally check out and you leave. What happens right now, there is a disconnect. And so the body actually knows on a really deep subconscious level that it's not safe to fully be present and to fully be yourself. And so what happens there is just like a scatteredness of energy. And until we bring all those parts and pieces back together, and this is where internal family systems comes into play, because you essentially journey back into your subconscious and talk to all these different parts. So you can go back into that painful memory and talk to the part of you that was experiencing the sexual abuse or that was experiencing the violence. And you can actually, in that memory, make that part of you feel safe and reintegrate it. And that actually changes the whole brain, it changes the whole nervous system. And so when we work with IFS and parts work like that, we can essentially recreate safety in the body.
Okay, so fascinating. I'm learning a lot. I did once hypnotherapy. Mm-hmm. Do you know, have you done?
Hypnotherapy is essentially what I do.
Oh,
yeah.
Fascinating.
It's just that, like I would use it more as an intuitive hypnotherapy because, you have the very classic hypnotherapy techniques. So I'm not using those, but I'm getting my clients into the same state. So they're in a hypnotic state in which we communicate through to their subconscious.
Interesting. So I had like a few, maybe I still have, problems with my, for example. Mm-hmm. I judge him and I am mad at him. So what she did with me is I was laying down and then she was like, okay, we kind of go pretty deep. And then I need to imagine like a dark room with red chairs. And then I imagine sitting in front of the chair. And then there's another chair in front of me and there I can put everyone on once. So I put and then it's like questions like, do you forgive me? Or why did it, like stuff like that. And then I was like, no, I can't. I don't forgive you.
Yeah.
And then she was like, okay, well, now imagine your kid. Like, where do you see him and stuff like that. And then I figured out that for me, it's not really my fault. I mean, I think I forgave him. But I forgave him because behind him, like, I imagined him in Paris, where he's from. And then I imagined, like, a caravan or, like, a really poor neighborhood. And then inside there was a dark corner, which his father was there. Mm. And he was, like, I couldn't see him. He was just, like, a dark ghost in the shadow.
Yeah.
Like the monster, kind of. So then I was like, okay, it's not your fault. Right? Is that kind of what you did for yourself? Is that what you do for your clients? Is it similar?
Yeah, it's a similar process. So we do a lot of the subconscious processing. And in the subconscious world, right, like the imagination, we can take it anywhere. So we can have like the phantom dialogues, which is what you just explained, where we actually imagine a person that we're talking to. There's also symbolism that we can go through. So we can encounter entities, we can encounter, it's like there's so much there that we can work with, but it's very similar to like other hypnotherapy techniques. And what I did to really get rid of all the symptoms that I was having. So, to kind of pick up where I left off, it was like infertility for 4.5 years. So I wasn't getting my cycle. I was experiencing a lot of brain fog and fatigue, extreme bloating, food sensitivities, things like that. I was experiencing anxiety, depression. I was retaining a lot of water, so a lot of inflammation in my body. And I had done...
bloating is basically water. Right.
It can be, yeah, but inflammation and puffiness you can also experience here. So if you wake up with like marks on your face and marks on your body, from the sheets and things like that, that's inflammation. So it's excess water under the skin that is creating the marks. And so what I did is, after trying years of supplements, cleanses, visiting different doctors, is I found liver detoxification. And I started doing detox protocols, specifically enzyme-based detox protocols that were targeting mucoid plaque buildup, which is essentially all this dried mucus with old waste, parasites, biofilms, things like that is coating the lining of our small intestinal walls. So I released probably 4 pounds of this mucoid plaque the first day I did this cleanse. First of all, I had never looked skinnier in my life. Like, I had been walking around with 4 pounds of waste in my small intestine, and I was tiny. So imagine, like a 200-pound dude or 300 pounds, how much waste he has in his small intestine. So that was the key to start. And then you do enzyme fasting, which allows your body go into autophagy and really cleaning up, the toxicity on a cellular level. And then you finish with a liver flush. And once I started liver flushing, this is really where I flushed out gallstones the size of quarters. I flushed out hundreds of parasites.
Gallstones?
Yeah, so they're buildup of bile, essentially. So it's coagulated bile, so they can actually become stones, and they can sit in your gallbladder and liver.
Kidney stones, it's called, right?
No, so those are in your kidneys. These are in your liver, so it's liver stones, essentially. Okay. And flushing those out, and then from there, I started doing a lot of really deep detox protocols, working on removing some of my heavy metals. And then the most important piece was the emotional piece, and really starting to work with my repressed anger, my repressed shame, my body image issues, my repressed sadness for, maybe not having my dad around for many years of my life. So there were so many layers of emotions that needed to be witnessed. And because of all the emotions, so many limiting beliefs that I needed to work on. And once I started working through that, my body actually started shifting on a level that I couldn't witness before.
Can you talk more about those limiting beliefs?
One of the most important limiting beliefs that people forget to work on in this industry is the belief that they've tried everything and nothing is working for them. And this is something that I've seen a lot of my clients. They've gone from doctor to doctor. They've done all the holistic protocols. They've done the meditations. They eat healthy, right? And they're still struggling with the symptom. So their main belief is going to be, nothing works for me. Or, And so that's one of the first beliefs that we start to reprogram and work on, and how fast their body shifts once they're actually stepping into a reality where that belief is no longer running their body. Because what do you think the body thinks when you're starting a new protocol, but subconsciously you already have the belief that it's not going to work for you anyway, right? So that's a really, really big one. And
I heard there was a study about people who think this is the opposite side of it. People who call themselves lucky, they would see everything differently to find signs of the answer they're looking for. And people who would call themselves, they did a study where they gave one group who thought they were lucky and one group that didn't thought they were lucky the same book, and they asked them to count a number in the book, a number of photos in the book or something like that. And then the unlucky guys, they were just counting the book, counting the photos. But in the lucky guys, they saw a photo somewhere, or they saw in the photo, they saw, stop counting, there's 42 photos. Mm-hmm. And so they finished it much faster. And this group didn't see it at all.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're speaking about is basically the opposite side of that, which is when you think you're unlucky, you're not seeing anything. You're just I guess, logical or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that then leads to deeper limiting beliefs, such as I'm worthless, I don't deserve healing. And now we're actually typically in the beliefs that are inherited, right? So we don't typically are born with the belief that we're unworthy of having a happy, healthy life, right? This can be an ancestral pattern that has continued generation upon generation. So a lot of the work that I do with my clients is deep ancestral healing. And the way that we do this is we go into the beliefs that were inherited, right? We're quite literally receiving that in our DNA. And so the scarcity that your parents were experiencing post-war, in my experience, is what needs to be cleared from your memory. It's deeply stored in your subconscious. And it's the same a lot of times what I see in my clients, for example, with fertility issues, whether we're talking about PCOS, endometriosis, or just infertility, is that there's a lot of repressed sensuality and sexuality, as well as a lot of repressed anger that goes generations back. So when we actually on a subconscious layer go into the emotions and the energetics behind their PCOS, behind their endometriosis, we'll actually find a lot of beliefs and a lot of energy that's not theirs. And so we have to go through this whole ancestral clearing of actually fully being able to express your truth, being able to express your sensuality, your sexuality as a woman. Because if you think about it, you know, it's like the day and age that we live in now, to fully express who we are as a woman is completely different from even 50 years ago. So maybe your parents, grandparents weren't able to really express themselves as a woman, and you're still feeling that, dealing with fertility issues now. And so a lot of the energetic work that I do with women that have fertility issues is a lot of repressed generational rage, anger, and repression of sexuality.
Wait, how does your grandma affect you? How does, I don't see the connection.
Certain beliefs and certain emotions can turn on and off genes. So when we talk about something genetic, I don't look at it from your dad has cancer, now you have a higher chance of cancer. I look at your dad had these certain emotions, these mental patterns that you're inheriting, not only because you grow up with them, so you're literally constantly receiving all of their mental patterns, their beliefs, right? It's like it's in their language, it's everywhere. So your gene is now also going to express itself in the same way. So this is what I like to look at with a lot of generational dis-ease, is that it's not really the genetic piece of it. Like, sure, you know, scientists might say it will contribute to a degree, but I really like to look at what's the emotion and what's the mental pattern that you inherited from your parents.
How do you inherit that?
It's actually
Is
in
it
your
physical?
DNA. It's in
Oh,
your
okay.
DNA. So
you're born like that.
you're born like that. It's kind of what I said earlier. It's like if your grandmother repressed anger, her liver is going to function differently, meaning that her whole body composition changes. Maybe she will make choices based on this belief, based on her repressed anger. She's going to make choices that are not as good for her. Maybe she starts smoking, right? So now the heavy metals in the cigarettes completely match her internal state, the repressed rage. So now the child of your great-grandmother received the heavy metals through the DNA, which have a resonance, right? So again, it's like lowering your brain activity. It's actually changing your emotions. So that repressed anger also gets given to your mom because she's being raised in a family where anger is not allowed because your grandmother wasn't allowed to express her anger. So how is she going to teach her child how to express her anger? So we're receiving that generation upon generation, as well as in our DNA. We inherit the toxicity from our parents emotionally and physically.
You used to be a model, you suffered a lot from a lot of things, and then you started healing yourself and you found out a lot of answers for your health problems, emotional problems, and now you've actually helped some people fix STD, which is not curable, right? According to science.
Yeah.
What results did you got?
Just going through my own healing journey and kind of shifting like that, I started realizing that there was a formula to life. And I started realizing that once I learned how to crack that formula, I could basically do anything. I could heal anything. I could become anything, right? And so it's the same thing in business. Like I apply this formula to everything in life. And it's essentially that anything that seems out of reach means because there is a block, right? And there's a block either in the physical body, in the mental body, the emotional body, the spiritual body, could be in all of them. So what I learned is how to identify this block. And I do this with things like muscle testing and things like that, and then to remove it. So it's the same with how this transformed my health, where I was like, oh, like this is going on in the physical body. It's because of this block in the emotional body. You sit with it, you remove it, you clear it. And so then I started applying that to business, right? It's like, okay, you make $5,000 months, why not 10? Because of certain belief systems, because of certain blocks, right? In the energetics, in your emotions, again, going back to belief systems and things like that it could be. And when you learn to shift those, there's also an open end there, right? So I do the same things with my client. I let them see where they have placed blocks subconsciously for themselves. So let's say that we're talking about the client that you were just talking about. So this client came to me and she was joining my 3-month realignment program, which essentially blends all of the modalities that I use. And she was just diagnosed with HSV. So, and according to her doctor, this was incurable. And so the first thing that we did is to break down all the societal constructs and beliefs that something is incurable. Because if your body thinks that it's incurable, it's not going to heal. So once we worked on the belief systems, we also worked on the emotions, because viruses thrive in a body with repressed emotion. And in this case, HSV thrives in a body where there's a lot of rage and anger. So we healed her relationship with her mom because she was holding on to so much anger and rage, which really affected her liver. And this is what we did through a lot of, subconscious reprogramming, emotional release work. And then on top of that, we did a cellular detox. So we started getting her body into autophagy, where she really started to heal herself on a cellular level. And so through various detox protocols, liver flushes, and subconscious reprogramming, within 2 months, she had a negative test result. And 2 months.
Oh,
yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really quick.
It's really quick. And, people will come to me and they're like, oh, okay, so can I heal my HSV now? And the answer is, it's going to be different for everyone, right? Because probably in her case, the issue was mostly in the emotional body. So we could shift a lot in the emotional body and the disease had no place in her body. For other people, if it's like 10 years of having a really unhealthy diet, we're going to first need to clear the body of that waste and the toxin in order to kind of get to the deeper layers. So this formula that I work with is really able to identify all the blocks and in which layers of the bodies, and then working with that. And
wow. Okay. So I think you're like the first woman I ever hear speak about emotional health, let's say. Yeah. And so just before we finish, what more results did you get for other people?
Yeah. So one of my clients came to me when he actually had done all of the detox protocols. He had done over 70 liver flushes. So basically the protocol where you flush gallstones out of your liver. He had done tons of parasite cleanses and things like that. And really what he wanted to target was scoliosis, and his nose was kind of angled sideways. And so these are 2 signs of liver congestion. So he was just cleansing the liver over and over again, hoping that it would resolve his liver congestion. He came to me, we stopped cleansing, and we actually just started focusing on energy work, emotional work, and quantum healing. And he released more parasites than he's ever released on a parasite protocol. His scoliosis started straightening itself out, and his nose started straightening itself out. And this all happened, again, within 2 months of us working together. So just because I work with practices like detoxification, emotional release, it doesn't mean that it's the answer, right? It's the same way for me. It's like I almost died doing the detox protocols that I now do with clients. What's the difference? I really look at where everyone is in their journey. And if your nervous system is dysregulated and your body is in a holding state because you don't know how to actually healthily release the emotions that are being released when you release physical things from the body, your body will just hold on to everything. And so it will actually not let go of the toxicity. It will not let go of the parasites. It will not let go of the emotions. And what's happening is that we can physically focus on flushing things out of the body. If we don't allow things to release from the body emotionally and mentally, we're actually not really dealing with the root of it.
Okay. So you almost died? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So this was at a time where I was doing a lot of pushing in my life. I was eating healthy. I was working out 5 times a week. I was doing all the saunas, all the detox protocols, cold plunges. I was on a heavy metal protocol, and I went into an ice bath. And this was a 0 degrees Celsius ice bath, so it was 32 degrees. And I was only in for about 2 minutes, but my cold receptors weren't working because I already was so cold that my body couldn't register how cold I was. And basically I got hypothermia, needed to go to the urgent care, and they had told me had I stayed in any longer, I would have killed myself. And my body was getting into full fight or flight. My organs were failing. I was having arrhythmia, so my heartbeat was super irregular, and my whole system was in panic. And I just heard, this is it. This is the last moment. This is how you're going to die. And in that moment, I realized that everything that I had been doing was wrong. I had been doing it from an energy of pushing, of forcing the body to release, of killing parasites, of releasing metals. And I hadn't been detoxing out of love, but been detoxing out of fear. And with the cold plunge, the thing that was so important is that, it's something that's so well promoted. Everyone says, go do a cold plunge, stay in for 10 minutes or stay in for 3 minutes. It's really great for you. But what they're not talking about is that a cold plunge isn't for everyone. And what I see specifically in the wellness industry is that women that already have irregular periods, painful periods, or missing periods, they should not be cold plunging at all because their bodies are clearly not producing enough heat, right? Their womb is probably already cold. And so what we're actually doing is we're further dysregulating our hormones. And then we haven't even talked about people with nervous system issues, right? Like if there's a lot of nervous system dysregulation, the ice plunge can be such a shock to the nervous system, and especially if your body isn't able to actually regulate hot cold fluctuations really well, and you're not warming up fast after the ice bath, it's a huge indicator that it's probably not for your body. Another thing is that we all have different Ayurvedic doshas. So if you're more Vata like me, you run colds. Like my hands and fingers are always cold. I should be heating myself up. I should be eating warm foods. I should be sitting in a sauna, and I should not be going into a cold plunge. So cold plunges really aren't for everyone, and there's more and more news that's coming out that it's actually causing people to have permanent damage in their hands, their fingers, their toes because of neurological damage.
What do you think about Wim Hof?
I think Wim Hof is great. I think that every single practice has a time and a place, right? It's just that people fall so far into extremes where they say, this is the thing that's going to heal me. And it's not. What's going to work for you is going to kill someone else. And so I think with anything that you do, the most important thing that you need to check in with is your body, right? How do I feel when I do this? People with nervous system dysregulation, they go to a holotropic breathwork class and they're actually re-traumatizing themselves, right? So if you feel worse after a class than you did before you came in, if you feel more dysregulated after an ice bath than before you got in, it's probably not for you.
What causes anxiety?
So a lot of times what people don't know is that anxiety and fear are the emotions ruled by the kidneys. The kidneys get affected by sexual trauma. So a lot of times what I see is that people that have had sexual trauma in their younger years is that they have more chances of developing anxiety and fear-induced thought patterns or mental patterns. And also because fear and anxiety really deplete the kidneys, let's say that we're having a lot of fear about our health and we're always worried about things. We're looking at labels, we can't eat this, we can't eat that. We actually deplete the kidneys from properly filtering and properly detoxing our bodies. So we're actually creating more stress by trying to be healthy. It's kind of like a catch-22.
What kind of detoxes are actually harmful?
Yeah. So there's this one specific supplement that actually almost killed me. Currently, a lot of people are currently focusing on doing heavy metal cleanses, and they're using these zeolite sprays. And these zeolite sprays, or also called nano zeolites, are marketed to really help you reduce your heavy metals, which in a way they do. And they do work great for kids because kids don't have as high of a toxic load as we do. So the way that zeolite works in the body is that it works in these cage structures, meaning that when a zeolite particle comes into your body, it just binds to whatever the heaviest metal is. So let's say it comes into the body, it first finds aluminum, right? It goes down, now it finds mercury. If we don't take enough of this zeolite product, it's going to swap out the aluminum for the mercury. So now it's dropping the aluminum in this part of the body. So if we're taking zeolite in such a low dose, in nano, quite often what it's actually doing, it's displacing the metals all over your body, causing even worse reactions and things like it can completely deplete your minerals and deplete your vitamins and actually cause more stress on your nervous system than before. So the supplement that people are talking about is helping you detox from heavy metals, actually can make things worse. I recently had someone reach out to me that it felt like he had kidney failure right when he started taking this supplement. So the one and only supplement that I love to work with is a high-dose zeolite from this very specific company. It's called ZeoCharge. So when we take zeolite in a really high dose, it not only mops up the heavy metals, but it can also bind to ammonia. It can help kill off parasites, mold, and things like that. So when we're consuming a supplement to help with metals, we actually want to take it in a higher dose. And this only goes for zeolite, because if we take other supplements in a higher dose, it would, of course, create more disturbance in our system.
So when did you realize that traditional medicine is not going to help you?
Yeah, so when I got my IBS diagnosis, I was put on all these supplements that were supposed to help me. And I was taking over 10 different supplements a day. I was spending hundreds of dollars a month, and it still wasn't fixing the issue. It was just putting a Band-Aid over it. So once I actually found the root cause of it, which for me was in the emotional and in the energetics, my body started to heal. Once I actually learned that we can heal holistically through detoxification, working with our emotions and the energetics of our bodies. And then through this journey, I've discovered that to truly heal, we need to detox our bodies, feel our emotions, and really have a body-based healing approach. And that is going to deal with the root of it and prevent you from spending hundreds of dollars every single month just to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Healthy? What do you mean by healthy?
You are not healthy if you need to take 10 supplements a day in order to feel good in your body. And so if the promise is you can feel good as long as you take these medications or these supplements, you're really not dealing with the root of it. You're really not healing something, but you're just helping the body suppress the severity so that it doesn't get worse or you don't feel those things on a daily basis. But if we actually learn to reduce the toxic load on our body, whether that's emotional, mental, or physical, the body can start to function normally again, and we don't need to rely on all these supplements and products.
So what's the biggest lie in the detox industry?
The biggest lie in the detox industry is that you can heal yourself if you just detox enough. The answer is never just the physical body. And so everyone will keep telling you to keep cleansing, to keep doing a parasite cleanse, to just remove everything from the body. And what they're forgetting is that the toxicity actually has an energetic and emotional counterpart that needs to be dealt with. If you're cleansing the liver and you're not dealing with the suppressed anger, the liver is going to get congested and toxic again. And so you can just keep cleansing the physical body over and over again, and it just becomes this trap until we really deal with the deep-seated emotions and the mental patterns.
What pattern do you see in high achievers?
The pattern I see most in high-achieving women is that they have a lot of health issues that really come from an overburdened nervous system. So that really come from a toxic body and a overstimulated nervous system. And what happens quite often in overachievers is that there is an overcompensation happening. So maybe when they were a child, they didn't feel seen, heard, or didn't feel good enough. And so now they wanted to grow up and become someone and something. And so there is this overcompensation that's happening. And what happens there is that there's actually a lot of suppressed anger, sadness, and frustration that the body is holding on to. So this tends to cause a lot of gut issues, liver issues. So we're seeing a lot of bloating, gut imbalances. We see a lot of acne and hormonal changes because those are regulated by the liver. So a lot of patterns that I see in overachieving women are skin issues, digestive issues, and brain fog, fatigue because of the nervous system dysregulation of all these suppressed emotions.
Okay, but if I'm a high achiever, I don't want to become a lazy person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
how do I still heal myself without hurting where I want to go to?
Yeah. Your high achiever mindset or your high achiever skill set can still stay the same, right? It can still produce the same outcome. It's just that when you actually regulate the nervous system, you're able to hold a lot more. So people often think that if they work on the emotions beneath their coping mechanism, that suddenly the coping mechanism isn't going to be there anymore. In fact, you're actually going to be able to hold a lot more. You're able to perform a lot better. So if you become a high achiever because you have a lot of suppressed sadness and you feel not good enough and you feel really small, if you work on the parts of you that feel not good enough, look at how much you achieved with feeling not good enough. Now think about what you can achieve when you're actually feeling really confident, when you actually feel like you are good enough, right? There's so much more capacity for the nervous system to hold energy, wealth, money. It's all about how much capacity your nervous system has to hold that.
So if I'm trying to become successful from a place of pain, if I fix that, I wouldn't be less driven?
No.
Because that's what I think.
Yeah. So that's the limiting belief a lot of people have. They think that if you become successful from a place of pain and then you work on the pain that you're going to become less successful or less driven. But it's actually the opposite. because the part of you that is driven is already fully developed, and that's the part of you that's still going to be there. But that energy, that part of you that's driven from pain, if we give that part of you a new focus and actually be driven by excitement and courage and love, it actually performs a lot better.
Okay, so this was my biggest objection from healing myself or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's actually...
Because all my spiritual hippie friends, they're like, oh, Sam, you got to fix yourself. You got to heal yourself. Yeah. But I'm like, but I don't want to be broke.
You're going to be making a lot more money, like a lot more.
Why is that?
Because if you... Right? It's like the body has a magnetic field. So think about this. When we see the body as just energy, because everything is energy, if this energetic field has all this denseness in it, right? It has all the limiting beliefs, it has all the repressed emotions, all the parts that are unhealed, maybe even physical issues. The magnetic field, which is directly correlated to how you're manifesting in life, because it's all magnetism, the magnetic field is scattered, so you're not able to attract as much wealth, which is again coming from this magnetism, because the body is scattered. So when we actually work on clearing our physical bodies, we're creating a more attuned vessel to then have clearer information coming through, right? This is when people really start developing their psychic abilities, which are inherently human abilities, but we've all just tapped out of them because we are so toxic and we're so dysregulated. But when the nervous system is regulated, when the body is not toxic, when the pineal gland is decalcified, we're able to become a clear channel of source. And so you're able to channel a lot more. People are going to receive that better because you're actually embodied, right? Resonance is emitted through sound. And you're going to hear it if I'm speaking from an out-of-body perspective, or if I'm fully embodying my wisdom. And so you're going to, like, your information is going to really land with people if you actually do the inner work. So you're creating a greater capacity for your nervous system to hold wealth because your nervous system is calm and regulated. Like if you feel with the amount of money, like if you feel dysregulated in your nervous system, and let's say you're making 100K a year, right? Your subconscious mind is going to self-sabotage so you don't make 200K a year, because right now it's already associating the 100K with being dysregulated. So out of safety, it's going to keep you from making more money or from expanding. So if you learn to regulate yourself with where you're at right now, your vessel will increase, your capacity to hold more wealth and more money will also increase.
So do you think like the richest people in the world are healed?
I'm not saying they're healed. I don't think anyone can ever be healed. And this is also not a direct connection, because some people get all the money and then are so dysregulated that they actually have a complete meltdown, right? This is the longevity path to success. This is the path to success that's actually sustainable. Like you can work your ass off and completely kill yourself and like create some tumors on the path to success, sell your business, make hundreds of millions of dollars, and then you're still empty, right? And then your body still has dis-ease. So if you're actually doing it step by step and you're healing yourself on the way there, you're actually getting to the place where you're able to hold those millions of dollars. Your nervous system is at that capacity, and there's so much regulation in your system.
I'm gonna post myself this podcast, and I'm probably gonna share it with so many, like every time you say something I'm like, oh, I should share this with him, I should share it with him. You might get a lot of clients from this podcast, I don't know, we'll see. But how do I pay you and what do I get for it?
Yeah, so when I work with clients one-on-one, essentially the first thing we do is we have a full deep dive into your body, into your life. So I look at everything from how's your physical body doing, how's your emotional body doing, any major traumas you've experienced, what's your current relationship to your body, to your emotions. And so based on that, I get this whole profile, right? So I figure out this is where you are, this is where your physical body is at. I start to create correlation between maybe like whether it's like skin issues or digestive issues or brain fog, fatigue, whatever you're experiencing. I start to correlate that to the major traumas and emotions that you've experienced. This is a lot of Chinese medicine, organ mapping, psychosomatics, and things like that. We even can look at tension patterns that your body is holding on to and things like that. Then we're going to create a lifestyle that's really good for you. So we're going to introduce certain practices that are going to help facilitate the release of emotions. We're going to be doing a lot of subconscious reprogramming, probably put you on a detox protocol that's really suitable for your system. So first, building the system to a place where it's actually able to detox from a regulated place. And then step by step, as we're helping your body release, we're also going to help your emotions release and reprogram a lot of things there. So every protocol looks completely different. Like there's no one client that I give the same protocol, which is what should happen in medicine, in my opinion, because no one individual is the same as the other. So through muscle testing, we can also see if your body is responsive to that. And I'm also going to teach you that, you know, you can actually feel like, oh, like I want chicken, but does my body want chicken, right? And then you can test your body for that.
Did you help people make more money?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give me examples?
I mean, that's hard because that's not a question that I ask my client, but I see, you know, it's like people, like I have a lot of clients that like want to start their own business. And so we work a lot on like the energetics, we work on their body, we work on like the fields and then change that. It's like you can, that's where I think I'm going to.
That might be a good question to ask your clients.
Yeah. I should for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. So you have a mentorship. It's one-on-one, or you have like, what do I buy? I want to buy.
Yeah. So
Tell me something.
So I have a one-on-one mentorship. It's a 3 or 6 month mentorship, and we have 6 or 12, depending on the length, meetings, which can be virtual or online, depending on where you live. And we will create custom detox protocols for you. I'll give you access to all of my group programs. So there's a ton of content that you can a ton of resources that you have access to when it comes to like emotional health, mental health, physical health. And with that, we start to really build out practices for you. So there's a lot of one-on-one support. There's voice note and text support Monday through Friday as well. So as you start to work with these emotions and with the physical body, things will come up in the sessions. And this is where it's so important to have the right support, because if you're releasing things, right, it's like suddenly an emotion comes up and it can send you into this really big emotional process. And so that's where we have the support. I also have guided meditations and breath work that you will be receiving as well. So that's the one-on-one. It's bi-weekly meetings, 75 minutes. And then the 6 month looks the same. It's just more like in 3 months we can do a lot, but in 3 months we can also do absolutely nothing. So I just like to look at like, who am I working with? Would I recommend like a 3 or a 6 month for them? If it's people that are already in the wellness industry, they've done everything, you know, they have all their routines in check, they're meditating, like they're really good, but they just can't figure out those last little things. Typically 3 months is amazing. But if you're like, I want to learn how to optimize my business, I want to like change my whole health, like typically I will say 6 months is a little bit better. And then I also have a 3 month group container, which I really teach people the exact method that got me to where I am, and also that I do with my one-on-one clients. So that's a 12-week program that starts on the 22nd of February. I do 3 or 4 groups per year, and that's a program that's taught life. So we go through every single step from regulating the nervous system, from identifying where you are at in your journey, what pieces are missing, how to do the emotional release work at home, and to really give you all the tools to really heal from anything, right? It's like you get a diagnosis of this. Instead of going into fear, you now learn how to sit with the emotions. You learn about the energetics. You learn about how to heal your body naturally. So that is my most extensive group program that I'm offering currently.
So what's the connection between parasites and trauma?
So your liver is actually storing your anger and frustration, and this is what you can do to release it today. So a few of my favorite practices to really start to work with the energy of the liver is to just hold the liver. So placing a hand over the liver, it's right underneath your ribcage on the right side, and just start to feel the connection to your liver. So a lot of people don't even know what the energy of anger feels like in their body because it's so suppressed. So you can do anger release practices that really build up this anger, such as like really being a child having a tantrum and just like throwing your fists in a pillow, or taking a few deep breaths and really letting out some sounds, some screams. So really starting to work with the energy of the emotion. And as you're doing that, as you're screaming or as you're really hitting a pillow, feeling that energy from the core, from your solar plexus, the liver, come up to be released. So this is how you can really let yourself connect to that anger, and then just asking the body, when was there a time where I was unable to express my anger? And just listening to what your body is showing you.
I like that. What's your fastest client transformation?
My client healed most of his symptoms in 3 weeks. He came to me when he was feeling completely dysregulated. He was feeling disconnected from source. He was having all these gut issues for a lot of years and has tried all the things and all the healing protocols. And the moment that we started doing emotional release work and we put him on a really simple detox, within 3 weeks, all of his symptoms disappeared, and he was the most amazing, aligned, thriving person that I've ever seen. It was the quickest transformation ever, and so for the remainder of our 2.5 months that we still had left in our program together, we kind of just did all these other practices, but all his symptoms were completely healed within 3 weeks.
Can you share like the emotional journey?
He was experiencing so much fear that it really was holding him back in business. And when he came to me, we started to really change his relationship to this fear. And what he witnessed was that it was actually not his fear, but it was his dad's fear. And so when we worked with his dad's fear and we really saw why his dad had so much fear, he was able to let it go, and his gut issues disappeared within 3 weeks.
So you didn't cry for 6 years? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I was so disconnected from my emotions that I didn't cry for 6 years. And when I was suicidal and depressed, I learned that it was safer to keep all my emotions inside. And so I was completely numb from the world, from my emotions, and just experiencing life really with this haze. And by doing somatic work and connecting to my body and the parts of me that felt previously disconnected, I was able to finally feel my emotions.
But you wanted to kill yourself.
In that space, I wasn't able to feel sadness. I wasn't able to feel anger. I wasn't able to feel joy. So I was so numb that all I could think of is there's no point of being alive. And I also felt no sadness about ending my life. So it was being so disconnected from all of my emotions that it was easier to think about leaving this planet, or it was easier to think about ending my life than to stay in the space of not being able to feel anything.
Did you have anxiety?
At that time, I wasn't feeling anxiety because I wasn't feeling anything.
So it sounds like being like in kind of an enlightenment mode where everything is like is. But maybe in the opposite side.
It's the opposite side. So what you're experiencing, right? You have what they call enlightenment or bliss, which is like the highest emotion that you can experience. Yeah. The complete opposite of that is apathy. And apathy is what you're in when you are suicidal. And it's basically the loss of all hope. It's the lowest emotion vibrationally that you can feel. And that's where I was at. And the only thing that I could do to make myself feel something was practice self-harm, because I could feel physical pain. So when I would cut myself, I would feel physical pain, which would allow me to have pain, which is higher than apathy, right? So I basically would practice forms of self-harm through all these different ways to get out of feeling disconnected.